I've been working night shifts at St. Augustine Hospital for a few months now. I took the job after my wife lost hers. We needed the money, and I thought I could handle it. I figured I'd just push through. But some nights were different. Some nights were really unsettling. One evening, I was in the supply room, restocking supplies. I heard faint cries coming from a patient room across the hallway. They were soft, almost like someone was in pain. I paused, listening hard. The cries sounded real, but I thought I was hearing things. Still, I wanted to help. I stepped over to the room, slowly opened the door, and peeked inside. The room was empty and dimly lit, the silence was deafening. I felt a chill run through me, like a cold breeze had swept over me. I told myself it was just my imagination. The next few shifts were strange, too. I found medical charts piled on the nursing station for patients I had never seen before. Their names were odd and unfamiliar. I remember one chart had a name that sounded old-fashioned, like something out of a dusty book. I thought maybe my mind was playing tricks because I was tired. But every time I looked, the charts were still there. I felt a creeping sense of worry but had no energy to look deeper. Things escalated when I noticed the lights flickering down one of the empty hallways. It was late, and I was alone, or at least, that's what I thought. The lights danced like they were alive. I slowed my pace, feeling a tension in the air. My heart raced, and I felt goosebumps on my arms. Suddenly, the lights went out entirely. For a moment, I was engulfed in darkness. I felt as if someone was watching me, but when I turned, there was nobody there. Just black shadows in the corners. That feeling didn't leave me. It was like a weight pressing down on me. I couldn't shake it off. I returned to the nursing station again, checking those charts a little too often, hoping for answers. Each time, I felt those nameless eyes on me. Then, one night, as I left the supply room, I heard a whisper. It was low, almost indistinguishable. I thought I was hearing things again. "Help me," it said. The words flooded my ears. I spun around, and the hallway was empty. My heart sank. I felt like the hospital was alive, a living thing, full of secrets waiting to reveal themselves. I looked around, searching for something to explain everything. But there was nothing. I couldn't make sense of any of it. I spent my nights on edge, restless, feeling like the hospital was watching me, waiting for something. The cries, the charts, the lights, I still don't understand what it all meant. Each shift I work leaves me asking more questions than before. What secrets does St. Augustine hold? Why do I feel like I'm not alone? Those questions still haunt me. I keep returning, hoping to find answers, but I'm starting to think that some things are best left unknown. That night, as I walked into the hospital, the air felt heavy. I could already sense something was off. I knew my shift would be long, but I hoped it wouldn't be full of the same eerie feelings that had been haunting me. Around midnight, I decided to take a break. I stepped into the staff lounge, hoping to catch a moment of peace. As I sipped some lukewarm coffee, I looked through the window overlooking the parking lot. The moon hung low, casting shadows across the empty cars. Then, I noticed a figure standing near the entrance. It didn't seem right. The person was just standing there, motionless, as if waiting for something or someone. I felt an uneasy twist in my stomach, but I couldn't tear my eyes away. I thought about asking if they needed help, but something held me back. Just then, the figure turned, and I could see it was a woman in a hospital gown. Her hair was wild, and her eyes, those eyes, they were wide and filled with something I couldn't explain. Then, as if sensing my gaze, she turned and disappeared into the shadows. I felt my heart drop. I didn't want to believe what I had seen, but I couldn't ignore it. I rushed back to the nursing station, that feeling of being watched creeping back again. I felt like I was being dragged into a web I couldn't escape. I tried to focus on my work and took another look at the medical charts piled high. I flipped through them absent-mindedly, and one name caught my eye again. Eleanor Hargrove. It was the same name I had seen days before, and I remembered the strange knot of worry it had stirred in me. I decided to look her up. The computer screen hummed to life, and I typed in her name, but oddly, no information came up. I tried variations of her name, nothing. Frustration bubbled inside me. Did she exist? Maybe I was just too tired. As I sat there, I heard it again, the faint sound of cries, clearer this time. They echoed through the hallway, guiding me like a wisp of smoke. My feet moved before I could think. I was drawn to the sound, curiosity pushing me forward despite the creeping dread in my gut. I turned the corner, and the cries led me to a door I had never noticed before, tucked away at the end of the hallway. It was ajar. I peeked inside. The room was dark but felt alive, reverberating with the quiet sounds of desperation. Heart pounding, I stepped in. It was an old storage room, filled with dust and forgotten medical equipment. But there, in the corner, sat a chair, and in the chair Eleanor. She looked up at me, her expression pleading. "Help me," she repeated. I couldn't understand why I felt an overwhelming urge to do just that, but before I could respond, the lights flickered violently overhead. Then, they went out. I stood there in the pitch black, breathing heavily. Eleanor was gone. The cries had faded into silence. I felt a wave of panic wash over me. I stumbled back, guided only by the walls as I tried to find my way out of the darkness. When the lights blinked back on, the room was empty. And alone in the silence, I realized something: I was no longer afraid of knowing the secrets of St. Augustine Hospital. I was terrified of what else I might find. I stumbled out of the storage room, my mind racing. What had just happened? I needed to process it all, but my heart was still pounding from my encounter with Eleanor. I felt drained as I made my way back to the nursing station. I didn't even register the eerie silence that filled the hallways until I was already there. The usual sounds of the hospital, distant beeps, whispers, and footsteps had vanished. It felt as though time had stopped, and a thick fog had settled. I paced behind the desk, hoping to catch my breath and refocus. Just then, the overhead lights flickered again but stayed on this time, offering a brief moment of comfort. I glanced at the clock. It was nearly 1 a.m. Shouldn't the others be here by now? My coworkers were typically punctual, and their absence added to the unsettling atmosphere. I shook my head, convincing myself that it was just a quiet night. But then the cries echoed through the hallway again, sharper and more pronounced, plunging me back into that knot of dread. I clenched my fists. Was I imagining things? My instincts yelled for me to investigate. I grabbed a flashlight and headed back down the hallway, following the sound. As I moved closer, I could hear something else mingling with the cries: a soft, rhythmic tapping. Turning another corner, I reached a door I hadn't noticed before. It was slightly ajar, just like the storage room where I had seen Eleanor. I hesitated. The muffled cries seemed to be emanating from within. I pushed the door open, the sound of my breath echoing in the stillness. Inside, the room was even darker than before, heavy with an unnatural chill. My flashlight beam danced across the walls until it landed on a figure hunched in the corner, near a bed covered with a thin sheet. I squinted, trying to make out what or who it was. The cries grew louder, pulsing through the air. Then, I saw her again. Eleanor sat on the bed, clutching her knees to her chest. Her hair framed her face almost like a halo, but there was something stark about her expression, a look of pure terror. She seemed to be looking past me, as if something loomed behind me. I turned quickly, heart racing, but I saw only the empty hallway. "Eleanor?" I stepped toward her, the air thickening with tension. "What happened to you? Why are you here?" Her eyes widened, and the cries turned into frantic whispers: "Don't let them take me. They're coming. The urgency in her voice sent shivers down my spine. I wasn't sure if she was speaking about the hospital or something else entirely. Suddenly, the tapping noise returned, louder now, and it was accompanied by a series of soft, hurried footsteps closing in on us. Panic coursed through me. "Who's there?" I shouted, moving defensively in front of Eleanor. The footsteps halted, but the tapping continued insistently, as if waiting for me to respond. I took another step forward, caught between wanting to protect Eleanor and the instinct to flee. Just then, the lights flickered and went out again, plunging us into darkness once more. I felt Eleanor's grip on my arm tighten, and the tapping grew frantic, blending with whispers that seemed to swirl around us. Before I could even process what was happening, the lights flickered back on, revealing the room empty. Eleanor was gone. I was alone, standing in a room that felt even colder than before. I could hardly breathe. That's when I saw a small piece of paper lying on the ground where Eleanor had sat, trembling in my hands. It was covered in scribbles, but one thing caught my eye: a date and a single phrase: "They never left." I dropped it, fear squeezing my throat. There were secrets here, dark ones, and I was only beginning to scratch the surface. But time was running out. Someone or something was coming for me next. I stood frozen, my heart slamming against my ribs. The room felt more like a tomb than a hospital space. I shook my head, trying to find a rational explanation for what I had felt. Eleanor's terror echoed in my mind, twisting my stomach in knots. Did she really just disappear? Where had she gone? I needed to get out of this room. The tapping continued, soft yet insistent. It stopped abruptly, cutting through the silence like a knife. I stepped outside and glanced down the corridor. Everything seemed to twist in shadows, but I could still see the path leading to the nursing station. I didn't feel safe, but I had to go back. I needed answers. As I hurried down the hall, a door at the end creaked open. It was the door to the pediatric ward, which should have been closed at this hour. Hesitant, I approached, peeking inside. The lights flickered in here too, casting erratic shadows on the brightly decorated walls. But it was the atmosphere, a heaviness that settled over me like a blanket that made my skin crawl. I entered, instinctively checking for anyone who might need help. The room was empty, devoid of the usual sounds of children murmurings. Instead, the air was thick with something unsettling. My flashlight caught something glinting in the corner of my eye. Something on the floor. Bending down, I picked up a small toy, a teddy bear, its eyes dull and lifeless. I recognized it. I'd seen that bear earlier while on a different shift. It belonged to a patient, a little girl who had been admitted days ago. She was gone now, discharged without a good explanation. I could still remember her mother, her brow furrowed with worry as she clutched that very bear. Without thinking, I tossed the toy back into the room. This wasn't the time to dwell on lost children or lingering pasts. The shadows danced around me again, making me uncomfortable. I turned to leave, but as I reached the door, I heard a whisper, "Stay." Chills traveled down my spine. I froze. I wasn't alone. It was no longer the ambience of an empty hospital, but something more pervasive, more alive. The whispers intensified, rising like an unreadable chant. I felt a shiver crawl up my skin as I glanced back into the room. I squinted into the darkness. My flashlight now illuminated a figure, a small silhouette at the end of the hallway. It was a child, standing perfectly still. Panic surged through me. Was this real, or was I losing my grip on reality? "Hello?" I called, my voice trembling. The figure didn't move, just stared back, unnaturally calm. Then the lights flickered again, plunging the hallway into darkness. Fear wrapped around me like a vice. I could hear the child's feet begin to shuffle, and the whispers were louder now, urging me to come closer, to come and find them. Then, the lights returned with a flash, and the child was gone. I stumbled back, pushing myself against the wall, trying to catch my breath. The only thing that remained was an overwhelming sense of dread. I turned to run back to the nursing station, but something caught my eye on the floor. Another piece of paper, crumpled and stained. I hesitated, my pulse racing. I picked it up, unfolding it with trembling hands. Written in a frenzied hand were the words, "You can't hide. They know you are here." I dropped it like it was on fire. I wasn't going to last in this hospital much longer. I had to find a way out now. I sprinted down the corridor, my heart hammering in my chest. The whispers had faded, but the fear didn't. I didn't want to be in this place any longer. Each step echoed against the sterile walls, a reminder of my growing panic. As I approached the nursing station, I pulled myself together, forcing my breath to come in steady gasps. I needed to report what I had seen, needed to make sense of this nightmare. I reached for the reception bell, but my instinct screamed to turn back. Without thinking, I moved toward a side room. Inside, I found a computer filled with patient records. I switched it on, hoping to find anything that could explain Eleanor's disappearance. No sooner had I pulled up the screen than the lights flickered again. This time, they didn't just flicker, they went out completely. The room plunged into darkness. My heart stopped. I fumbled for my flashlight, but the beam of light seemed dull against the overwhelming blackness. Panic threatened to consume me, but I fought back. I had to stay focused. Then I heard it. A soft giggling, echoing from the corridor. It was the same child's giggle I had heard before. I turned toward the sound, the instinct to run battling against the need to understand what was happening. "Is someone there?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. The giggles stopped. Silence fell, heavy and oppressive. I gripped the edge of the desk, willing myself to stay calm. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks, maybe I was just being paranoid. After what felt like an eternity, the lights blinked back on. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. The room felt colder, as someone else stepped inside. It was a nurse, her face pale, eyes wide with fear. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice a touch frantic. "What do you mean?" I replied, trying to keep the tremor from my voice. She leaned in closer, her whisper urgent. "Children have been disappearing from this floor. Last week, it was a little boy. Today, a girl. No one can find them. They say a darkness is taking them." I felt the blood drain from my face. The whispers, the shadowy figure, it all slammed into my mind at once. I wasn't just tired. I was caught in something terrible. "Have you seen Eleanor?" I blurted out. "She was just Eleanor is gone," the nurse interrupted, her expression full of concern. "You need to leave this place. Now." Before I could respond, I heard the giggling again, closer this time, right outside the door. The nurse turned, eyes wide with panic. "We have to get out of here," she shouted. With that, the lights flickered once more, but this time, they didn't come back. The air grew thick, and the whispers returned, swirling around us like a storm. I felt as if we were being watched. I needed to escape, but every exit felt blocked. That's when I saw a flash of movement in the corridor. A small figure took off, running toward the staircase. "Wait!" I shouted, instinctively following. But as I chased after it, the flashlight flickered and died, plunging me into an abyss. Was I running toward salvation or deeper into the nightmare? I stumbled into the darkness, my breath quickening as panic clawed at my throat. The sound of my feet hitting the floor seemed to echo, drowning out everything else. I strained to catch up to the small figure, my heart racing with both fear and a desperate hope that it was Eleanor. "Please!" I called, but only the silence answered. The cold air brushed against my skin, heightening my senses. I felt the weight of 1,000 eyes on me, yet there was only emptiness. I forced myself to keep moving, inching forward slowly, trying to avoid any noise. In the blackness, I couldn't tell how far I had gone. The oppressive quiet was unsettling, and the whispers I had heard before now crept into my mind again, taunting me. Shadows danced along the walls, shifting like living things. Then the darkness lifted, like a curtain pulling back. I found myself at the top of a staircase, the dim emergency lights flickering weakly. I peered down, the stairs spiraling into a deeper abyss. Just as I was about to descend, a chilling realization hit me. The giggling had returned, louder now, and it echoed from the very stairway I was about to step onto. "Is someone there?" I demanded, feeling foolish yet defensively bold. The giggles responded with an eerie, childlike tone that sent a cold shiver down my spine. It was playful, yet I sensed an underlying malice. I took a cautious step back, ready to rethink my course of action. Suddenly, I heard a panting sound behind me. Spinning around, I saw the nurse from earlier, breathless and visibly shaken. "We shouldn't be separated," she said urgently, grabbing my arm. "Come on, we need to find a way out." Before she could finish, the lights overhead blinked violently, and we were plunged back into darkness. Frantic, I grabbed for her hand. "Where do we go now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Follow me," she shouted, pulling me toward the staircase. I heard them down there. Before I could protest, she sprinted down the steps, dragging me with her. The air grew colder as we descended, and I could feel the darkness clawing at us like long fingers trying to pull us back. I steeled myself, forcing every ounce of courage deep into my core. As we reached the bottom, faint light seeped through a door. I felt relief wash over me until the giggling erupted again, shattering the silence like glass. It was different now, closer, more orderly, as if it were calling us. "Do you hear that?" "It's not far," the nurse said, her eyes wide. I shook my head, the terror rising in my throat. "No, we should go back." But before I could tug her away, the door we were approaching creaked open on its own. There, just inside the threshold, stood a small girl dressed in a hospital gown, her hair obscuring her face. The giggling stopped abruptly. I felt moisture pooling in my palms, and my breath quickened again. "Come play with us," she whispered, and with that, every instinct screamed to run. Then I noticed the hallway behind us. Shadows moved, shifting in ways that made my blood run cold. Whatever was happening wasn't just a figment of my imagination, it was real and pressing. I hesitated, caught between the urge to flee and the need to know what was going on. But before I could make a choice, the lights flickered out once more, and everything went silent. The darkness enveloped us again, and I knew whatever was in this place, it had no intention of letting us go. I blinked, trying to adjust to the oppressive darkness that swallowed us whole. My heart pounded in my chest, a frenzy of fear coursing through my veins. I could feel the nurse's grip on my hand tightening, her fingers trembling. "Stay close," she whispered, and I nodded even though I could barely see her face. Then, there was movement. I strained to listen, but it was hard to discern what was real in the swirling blackness. The girl's voice echoed again, delicate yet haunting, "Come play with us." The word sent chills down my spine, and I felt my stomach drop. It was as if the shadows themselves were alive, stretching towards us with sinister intent. "We need to move," I said, my voice shaky. "Let us find another way out." Just as I turned to suggest we retreat up the stairs, the lights flickered back to life. They buzzed angrily, revealing the small girl once more, her long hair concealing her face but her eyes shimmering like dark stars peering from behind a veil. The giggle erupted again, but it sounded different this time. There was an edge to it, as if the playfulness had turned sinister. "That's not right," the nurse murmured, looking back and forth between the girl and me. "There's something wrong here." "We should." A loud bang echoed down the hallway, cutting her off. I flinched, my skin prickling with fear. The source of the sound was off to our left, where a door had slammed shut. It felt ominous, like a warning we couldn't ignore. "Did you hear that? We should go this way," I urged her, pointing toward the door that had closed. Something about it felt important, like it held a secret we needed. "Are you insane?" she shot back. "Those children are not real." I interrupted, my voice rising with urgency. "We can't stay here." With the girl still standing there, still giggling softly, I sprinted toward the door. The nurse hesitated, but in moments, I felt her presence behind me. We reached the door and I pushed it open, ready for whatever lay beyond. The room was dark, filled with strange gear and medical equipment I couldn't quite recognize. Lights blinked erratically overhead, throwing odd shadows across the walls. A thick, acrid smell filled the air, and I fought the urge to gag. "Why does it smell like?" the nurse began, but she stopped abruptly. I could see her eyes wide in the dim light as she pointed toward the far wall. That's when I saw it. A series of photographs pinned haphazardly, each one showing the same little girl from just outside the door. In each picture, the child was smiling, but something was off. The joy in her eyes looked almost too intense, unnatural. Suddenly, the giggling intensified, wrapping around us like a warm blanket. My heart raced as I felt a cold breath against my neck. I turned, but no one was there. "What is happening?" the nurse whispered, fear creeping into her voice. Before I could answer, the lights flickered again, plunging us deeper into shadow. I realized we weren't alone. A presence loomed behind us, heavy and palpable. We were being watched. I spun around to face the door, ready to flee, but it slammed shut on its own, locking us inside. Panic rose in my throat as the laughter crescendoed, echoing through the room. Trapped, I knew one thing for sure: we weren't going to make it out. The air thickened around us, heavy with dread as the laughter warped into an eerie symphony. I grasped the nurse's arm tighter, my pulse racing. She was frozen, staring wide-eyed at the photographs, seemingly entranced. "Look closer," I urged, my voice a frantic whisper. "There's something wrong with her." But before she could respond, the lights flickered again, briefly illuminating a figure crouched in the corner. My stomach twisted as I caught a glimpse of a shadow that didn't quite belong. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing it away, but it lingered, a dark shape creeping toward us. "Did you see that?" I gasped, my heart thumping in disbelief. The nurse turned, and for a moment, a spark of determination crossed her face. "We need to get out of here now," she said, breaking her trance. She rushed to the door, pounding on it, but it didn't budge. "Stop!" I shouted, my desperation mixing with anger. "Do you think that will help?" The room felt like it was closing in on us, the laughter deepening, reverberating within the walls. I could almost feel it wrapping around my throat, squeezing tighter. Taking a step back, I scanned the room for anything that could help us escape. A window? An air vent? That's when I noticed the table in the center, cluttered with papers and old medical tools. One paper caught my eye, an old report dated decades ago, focusing on experiments involving children like the girl outside. I picked it up and felt a chill run through me as I read about observation notes and eerie findings. "They were observing her," I mumbled, horrified. The nurse turned, finally looking at the report. "What does it say?" "Something about enhanced abilities." "They were trying to study her," I said, my voice trembling. "This can't be real. She's just a child." "But those photographs, she's not alone in some of them," the nurse pointed out, a hint of panic in her tone. "There are others." I turned back to the wall, scanning the photos again. There were glimpses of other children in the background, faceless shadows surrounding her, almost as if they were trapped too. My breath hitched as I realized a disturbing connection: none of them seemed to have escaped as we were trying to. Suddenly, the lights flickered more violently, casting distorted shadows around us. The presence that had loomed behind us seemed to surge forward, and I felt a rush of cold air whip through the room. "They're here," I whispered, dread settling into my bones. "They want to take us just like her." Without warning, the door rattled violently, shadows darting on the other side as if a crowd was pushing against it. The laughter rose into a chilling crescendo, drowning out all my thoughts. "Find something. A tool, anything." The nurse yelled, but all I could do was stare at the advancing shadows. They were coming for us. I took a step back, trying to get away, but my foot caught on something. I stumbled, falling against the table. Papers flew everywhere, revealing more bloody experiments and failed attempts on children like the one outside. And then, atop all that chaos, I heard a voice, a quiet, childish whisper. "Come play with us." Panic gripped me, and I knew then that there was no escaping this nightmare. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were next in their game, mere pawns caught in a terrifying game of shadows. Just as the door burst open, I thought I glimpsed something ghastly on the other side. Someone, or something, stood waiting in the doorway, and whatever it was not alone. I barely had time to process the sight before me. The door swung wide, revealing a mass of shadows. Figures pressed against the frame, a collection of twisted shapes that seemed human but were grotesquely deformed. Their hollow eyes glinted in the dim light, and mouths twisted into grins that felt wrong. "Back!" shouted the nurse, grabbing my arm and pulling me away from the door. But there was nowhere to go. The laughter grew louder, enveloping us, and I felt my breath hitch in my throat. I turned, desperately searching for something, anything to defend ourselves. That's when I saw it. A rusted scalpel under the scattered papers. I lunged for it, my fingers closing around the cold metal. It felt useless, a knife against a swarm of dark shapes. The entities began to spill into the room, slithering through the doorway like smoke. One reached for us, its fingers elongated and gnarled, mist swirling around its hand. In one sharp motion, the nurse swung an old metal tray at the advancing shadow. "Run!" she screamed as the tray made contact, sending sparks flying but doing little to stop the swarm. I didn't need telling twice. I dashed to the opposite wall, my heart pounding as I pushed against the medical cabinets. They were locked, yet some were ajar, filled with syringes and vials. I had to think fast. Look for something to barricade the door. I yelled, but the nurse had her hands full, swatting at the shadows that began to engulf her. She was overwhelmed, a look of desperation mixed with terror on her face. "Get the chair!" she shouted back, and I saw it, a small, wooden chair tucked in the corner. I ran for it, dragging it across the floor. With all the strength I had left, I wedged it against the door, hoping it would hold. The smoke-like figures pressed at the edges, their voices rising in ominous harmony. "Play with us," they chanted, twisting their bodies as if dancing to a chilling melody. I couldn't see any real features, just outlines that threatened to swallow us whole. "Is there a way out?" I asked, panic bubbling up. The nurse shook her head, breathless. "I don't think so. We need to stay." A massive thud echoed as something slammed against the barricaded door. The chair shook, splintering under the pressure. I felt it under my hands, fear rushing through me. Then I noticed something. A small vent above us, slightly ajar. "The vent!" I gasped. "We might be able to crawl through it." "It's too high," she said, glancing back at the door. "I can boost you," I insisted, adrenaline pumping. I didn't care about the shadows or the walls closing in. I just wanted out, away from whatever nightmare had consumed us. The chair cracked again, and I gritted my teeth. Time was running out. "You have to trust me," I urged. With one last shove, I pushed her toward the vent. As she jumped, I took the knife and prepared for whatever came next. But just as she grasped the edge, the door burst open entirely. Shadows flooded in, and the chilling laughter erupted around us like a thunderclap. I couldn't process what happened next. It was like watching a scene play out in slow motion, each shadow stretching toward us, the sickly sweet scent of rot filling the air. My world narrowed to the sight of her vanishing into the vent, leaving me facing the darkness. And then, just as they swarmed, everything went black. I awoke on the floor of the pediatric ward, gasping for breath. My heart raced as I scrambled to sit up, disoriented. The familiar hum of the hospital buzzed around me, yet it felt different, stranger. I pushed myself up, my body heavy, soaked in sweat. The lights were on, flickering gently, and the sound of the beeping machines echoed in rhythm like a relentless heartbeat. Confusion coursed through me as I looked around. The room was exactly as I remembered it, but there was something unsettling about the stillness, an emptiness that gripped at my insides. I got to my feet unsteadily and rushed to the door. Pushing it open, I stepped into the hallway, half expecting the whispers and shadows to return, but it was quiet, too quiet. The overhead lights cast long shadows, but no movement pierced the silence. I walked slowly, tentatively, praying that I had escaped that nightmare, but deep down I knew better. The feeling of being watched lingered like a ghost, gnawing at the back of my mind. "Hello?" I called, my voice echoing down the corridor, swallowed by the gloom. I listened intently for a response, but the only sound was the distant hum of machinery. I turned the corner towards the nursing station, and that when I saw her, the nurse, sitting at the desk, still as a statue. My heart leaped, hope fluttering momentarily in my chest. "Are you okay?" I rushed over. "Did you find her?" she asked, her eyes vacant, swirling with confusion. The weight of dread returned, and I realized she didn't see me. She was lost to another reality, a realm shrouded in darkness. "Eleanor?" I murmured, remembering her desperate pleas. "Is she gone?" The nurse blinked, and for a moment, recognition flickered in her eyes. "One of us must have made it out," she said, her voice a whisper. "But they never really left. They can't." I felt ice settle in my veins. "What do you mean?" "They are always watching, waiting," she answered, her eyes darting like a frightened animal. "They want more playmates. We lead them to the light only for them to fall back into the dark." I looked down the hallway, feeling drawn once again to that emptiness. "How do we were right there." As if answering my unasked questions, the silence fell heavy in the air, replaced by a low hum that resonated through the walls. Shadows danced at the corner of my eyes, teasing me with the notion of mystery, guiding yet terrifying. Before I could process it further, the lights flickered, and I heard giggling echoing again, a chorus of childlike voices breaking the silence. My blood ran cold. The same giggle that had haunted me before. I turned toward the source, my heart racing. "Stay close," the nurse warned, gripping my arm as fear swept through her. But I felt a tug in my chest, a call. The shadows now loomed closer, pulsing with life, their laughter growing stronger. The flickering lights turned red and then black, enveloping us once again in total darkness. It felt as if reality itself was splintering, reshaping into something I couldn't grasp. I couldn't tell if I was dreaming or if I had truly escaped, yet the laughter enveloped me, each peal echoing with an ominous joy. "Don't let them take you," I heard the nurse whisper just before the darkness swallowed her completely. I cried out, but it was too late, she was gone. I stood in the dark, the giggles swarming around me. How could I defend myself against what lived in these walls? I felt my breath quicken, my heart pounding as I realized I was back in the grip of something far more sinister than I could fathom. Somewhere deep inside the hospital, echoes of forgotten secrets danced with lingering presences that took root in my soul. As I stood frozen in the dark, I understood there would be no escape. Not for me, not for those lost children, or the nurse who had once shared my fears. I took one last breath before stepping forward into the shadows, knowing I was not just seeking answers anymore but embracing the darkness, becoming one with the thread of fate that knitted us together in a web of perpetual night. Questions would always linger unanswered, and I realized I was destined to find my place among the shadows that never left.